Welcome to Get Rich, the podcast that helps you do just that. Get rich and stay rich. Hey, I'm Molly Benjamin. I'm the founder of Ladies Finance Club, one of Australia's largest financial education platforms for women. But before I started helping thousands of women take control with their money, I was a hot financial mess when it came to my own finances. And not the fun kind of hot, more like crying in a supermarket wondering where all my money went kind of hot. But here's the thing, if I can go from financial mess to owning a share portfolio, investing in property and building wealth, then you can too. My mission is simple, to make women rich. Because when we have financial freedom, we have choices, confidence, and control over our future. Every week on Get Rich, I sit down with some of the best experts in the industry to break down how we can all start investing, growing our money, and creating long-term financial security without the jargon, boring bits, or overwhelm. Because when women get rich, we don't just change our lives, we change the world. So if you're ready to start making some smart money moves, hit that subscribe button and let's get rich together. Welcome back to Get Rich, the podcast that helps you do just that. Get rich and stay rich. I'm your host, Molly Benjamin, founder of Ladies Finance Club. And at the time of recording this, I am actually pregnant with my first baby. I've just finished my first trimester. So this is a hot topic for me, one I'm living and breathing right now, how to financially prepare for a baby. Now, a lot of people will say having children is expensive, but if you are curious about what it really costs, this conversation gives you, some numbers, some tips, and the must-do money moves before your little one arrives. And when I was thinking about who I wanted to get on for this episode, I was like, definitely want a financial advisor. So I asked the awesome Jayde Jenkins, who is a mum of two, and the beautiful Ash Cam, who's the host of the Reset podcast, and she runs women's retreats. And by the time this episode has come out, she will have given birth. So we wanted to break down the true cost of having a baby in Australia, how to budget for maternity leave, childcare, and those unexpected expenses that nobody warns you about. So if you want to go into parenthood feeling prepared instead of panicked, keep listening. This one's full of really practical, real-world advice you can start using today. And if you're enjoying these episodes, show us a little bit of love by hitting that subscribe button. All right, let's dive in. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited for this conversation, ladies.
Thanks, Molly. Thanks for having us.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So let's jump straight in. As I mentioned in the intro, I am expecting. Ash, I know you are very close to having your baby. And Jayde, you have kids of your own. So I feel like we're covering, we've got a good amount of experience between us. Well, not that I'm bringing much to this, but between you guys. So I just wanted to kind of go, when we're kicking off and we're maybe an expecting parent, the finances can be a bit overwhelming. It's like, oh my God, where do I even begin? And when we speak to anyone at Ladies Finance Club and they're in the start of their money journey, we always say, start with an emergency fund. So, is this a good place to start when you're expecting a baby, like setting up a baby emergency fund?
It was really funny, Molly, this question, because my kids are now 3 and 5. So I was going, okay, what did we do? And I think absolutely, obviously, having an emergency fund in general is going to come in handy. But I did write down some notes in terms of things that popped up as our kids got older. So I guess I've had 5 years experience as a parent now and friendship groups and all that. We've all got kids. So obviously there's random stuff that's going to pop up for babies. So my youngest had eczema, which by 3 months we'd worked it out. So it was multiple trips to the GP. Not that cost, but the prescriptions cost and all that goes with it. And then I quite quickly realized that steroids was not the answer for us. And so I looked at naturopathy. So we went through that process. And I think from memory, it was about $1,000 for all the appointments and the treatment that they use, which was a good outcome for us, but it was expensive, obviously.
Yeah.
And then there were things like by the time they're 2, your ear, nose, and throat issues sometimes pop up. So it might be tonsils and adenoids removing. And speaking to friends, those costs can range from $2,000 to $5,000, depending if you have private health insurance or not. And the public waitlist, I think, for kids is really long to do things. I think that's probably an important thing to point out is that if you don't have private health insurance for your kids, the wait lists are quite often 2 and 3 years long for various things that happen. So you kind of just go, we can't do this for like 3 years. Let's just pay for it. So things like that pop up. There's also some things that come in I found around the age of 3, which was like additional supports like OT and speech therapy.
Yeah.
So, they're like $200 a pop if you're not on NDIS. So those sort of things. And then if you go further from that, and if you've got like ADHD in the family and you suspect your kids might be too, then that's another big exercise and a big cost. So I just feel like as they age, maybe not so much immediately as a baby, like sure things pop up, but the additional support that I never, expected any of those sort of things to fall into our lives, but various pieces of that have.
Okay. So I would say, in short, the answer is yes, have an emergency fund.
Yeah, and I did give a figure actually. So I said maybe start with about, if you can, 5,000 is a good buffer point, because that's going to give you a little bit of choice when it comes to having private health or not and getting through wait lists and all that sort of stuff.
Okay, great. So what was that figure, sorry, again?
About 5,000.
5,000. Awesome. And Ash, how have you approached budgeting for the new baby?
Not that well. And I thought,
I like the honesty.
Yeah. For anyone that's just listening to audio, I'm about to show a very scribbled on bit of paper, which was my budget. But if you're watching video, it's like just chaos notes, right? So when we first started our baby journey, we thought, okay, we want to go private. That suits us. So we had private health insurance, and a friend gave me a savvy tip to just put myself on the pregnancy cover, not do couples pregnancy cover. And that ended up being a little bit cheaper for us. So my partner's just on a basic health cover and I'm on pregnancy.
Yeah.
And we thought, cool, that should cover pretty much all of the medical expenses on the journey. It doesn't. We'll talk about that in a second. And then my little paper shopping list was sort of what I roughly thought from Googling. I'd need a pram, a bed, a carrier, like some basic stuff. We'll just play it simple. Yeah. So my budget that I had written on this little bit of paper was $3,500. And I thought, yeah, it's fine. We'll just be minimalists. We just need the basic things. If you add up the private obstetrician costs, the private scans, the things that we've ended up purchasing that kind of blew the budget, we're sitting close to $15,000 now.
Wow.
On top of private health insurance. I'm sure if I was a second-time mom, maybe that figure would look different and I would do things differently. Similar to Jayde, where there's things that pop up that you can't plan for. So our baby was, from some of the scans we had in the earlier days, the obstetrician was concerned that maybe she would stop growing towards the end. And so we have had to pay for some additional scans, which probably came in around $1,000 total. But the rest of the stuff, in hindsight, I probably could have researched and planned for better. But yeah, it's been a little bit more expensive than my initial budgeting.
Yeah. So at the time of this recording, I am 11 and a half weeks. And I'm going public at the moment. I might, because I would like to come to the Gold Coast and go and just pay for private. But by the time I got around to adding private pregnancy cover, you needed to have it for 12 months. And me and my partner have only been together for 9 months. So we wouldn't have even hit that. And the guy who I got my health insurance with, he kind of also talked me out of it a little bit, because he's like, you're going to be paying the excess. So by the time you pay it, his advice was actually just pay cash if you want to go private towards the end for the delivery, which was really interesting. So now we are going public, but even going public, I've been surprised at some of those costs already involved. Obviously, like there's been like getting vitamins, which haven't been too crazy, but then there's been the scans, the doctor's appointment, which you do get a little bit back for Medicare, but not a huge amount. And then next week we've got to get some tests. There's tests to see if the baby, I think it's called the NIP test. Yeah. And they're like, oh, it's $500 and you can't get anything back from Medicare. And I'm like, well, that's fine for me, but that is concerning for people who, might be struggling financially. That is a huge amount of money. And yeah, I did wonder in those situations, like, do they just decide not to get them? Or I don't know how people do it. Like it must be really tough for a lot of people out there. So I think we've talked about kind of like the expectations around the cost versus the reality. So, Ash, can you break down how you're budgeting for, and if you are, you might not be, but for that first 12 months of having a baby?
Yeah, so my partner and I are both self-employed, so we don't get any sort of benefits from our companies. It's our own. But I'll be eligible for the government maternity pay, which is around $900 a week now. And they are starting to pay super on top of that, which is amazing. And then my partner's going to take a couple of weeks off and then slowly transition back to part-time. And then his full-time will be 4 days a week once he goes back. So hopefully between the two of us, we can kind of navigate this new parenting journey. But we've been sort of thinking about it and planning it for the past 2 years. So while I don't have, you saw earlier, my budgeting techniques are not the best, we're sort of in a comfortable position to move forward.
Nice. And had you been saving for this moment in the past?
Not necessarily, but we were really intentional about where we purchased to live was very much within our means. So I'm sure most people do this when they fall pregnant. They suddenly think like, oh, do I need a bigger house? Do I need a bigger car? All these sorts of things. But we sort of mentally work through that and we're like, no, we're going to stay in our apartment, that the mortgage feels manageable and not stretch ourselves too much so that we can have the sort of a little bit of flexibility when baby comes.
Yes. And Jayde, having kind of been through this process a few times, what do you think are like the key must-haves when you've got a newborn, and where can parents cut back that maybe, I guess, from discussions with your friends as well, where can parents afford to cut back?
It's probably what Ash has commented about, maybe spending in areas she thought she wouldn't, and then the second one. So I think that we were it was a different sort of time in terms of when we bought stuff for our kids, because this is like 2020 and things were still really cheap. So you could go to Baby Bunting and buy a $300 cot pretty easily and all those sort of things. That might be a lot more now. So in terms of a newborn, they really, let's be real, they don't need much. They need somewhere to sleep, a safe travel, so like pram and car seat, and food, whether that's breast milk or whether that's formula. So you can do it. I found that with my second one around, I didn't buy anything for him because we knew we were having a boy. That was easy. But if it was still my first, really for him, all I had was a bassinet, clothes, all that essential sort of stuff. And then as he got older, like we didn't start his nursery until he was 4 months old. And so we just took our time to do it that way. And I think that, if you are budgeting for a new baby, that don't get too excited and go out and buy all the things before they come, because one, you might have a premature baby and then you can't fit the clothes. You might have a bigger baby and you can't fit the clothes, or your living situation might change. Whatever that looks like, there are sort of 4 key things you need for a newborn, and then you just collect and collate stuff as they get older.
Yeah, so true. And I am, like, I say this now, but I'm very much on I was looking at change tables and I was looking at what they are brand new versus what I could find on Facebook Marketplace as a bit of a challenge. Yes, we can afford brand new, but like, I'd much prefer to spend $50 on a new one. Also, I don't want to just keep creating waste. So I'm like, if I can use someone else's and it's in a really good condition, I'm all about that. But do you guys have any thoughts on buying new versus secondhand?
Yeah, I initially thought similar to you, but then we've ended up purchasing a few things. And I thought from a safety perspective, my mum brain started to go wild. And I was like, I want to be the one to use it new, and then I will sell it secondhand. Yeah. And so like a snoo, for example, which is this very fancy kind of bed that they can use for only 6 months, but it's got an electronic component to it. And I just started to go through my head of like, what if I buy a secondhand one and it was mistreated or something like that? So the way I tried to kind of save a little bit is there's a few key moments that all the baby stores seem to have sales. So Mother's Day sales. So I saved, I think, $400 off my snoo, which should have been around $2,000, which is a lot of money, but I will sell it. And then I went to a baby expo and they had, if you have done your research in advance and purchase on the day, you can kind of save like 20% here and there, and end of financial year sales as well. So yeah, I'm kind of doing it the opposite way around. I will buy new, but then I'm intentionally going to sell these things after.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there's some things where I'm like, a pram, like I want to buy that brand new, and a couple of other things. But yeah, kids, in the words, I don't know if you guys know Anna Kreshner, she wrote a book called Kids Ain't Cheap. And I'm like, She had a point. And what was interesting the other day on Ladies Finance Club, I put out a post about what were some of those expenses you weren't expecting in motherhood. And it probably came up every second time. It was the cost of you not working and your super being affected, and then also childcare. So Jay, do you have any tips around how women can make sure that it's fantastic that the government is now paying super on maternity leave, and we are in self-employed, so that's really important. But I guess around that super, like, are there conversations we should be having with our partner? And also, Jade, if you have any tips around the power change, because you go from earning to not earning and being maybe a little bit more reliant on your partner.
That's a really interesting point, because when we had our first child, I was the higher income earner. And then when we had our second child, it flipped to be I was not the higher income earner because my husband started his business. And so when I had my first baby, it was quite a big deal in terms of like, oh, okay, now I'm going to have half my salary. And there was thoughts around like, well, should I be the one going back to work full time because I have that higher earning capacity, all those sort of things. I think for us, there never really felt like a power shift because we combined all our money very early on in our relationship, and our family money has always been our family money, even before we had kids. So we kind of just contribute what we do contribute to it. Everything gets paid for the way it should be, and all our goals were kind of set. Yeah. It was probably more the budgeting side of things to say, like, I mean, for me, in terms of a power shift, maybe I was very career focused before I had children. And I remember having a conversation with my boss saying, okay, how about I work 4 days, but I'll do my 5 days of hours in those 4 days. And he said, sure, like, I'm more than happy for you to do that. But
of course you want.
Yeah, let's have this conversation when you get back. And I was like, okay. And on the first day I went to him and I said, scrap what I said, I'll just do my 4 days. And I was in and I was out and I just wanted to get home. So I think your priorities do shift. And from a financial perspective, I think for myself and any of my girlfriends who have been particularly career orientated, it's a really big mind shift and mental change to then be going, I have 2 priorities now, like, and they butt heads and they get in each other's way, and I can't be the same person that I was in my this role or my that role because I've got this other little person to put first. And it's a really hard juggle trying to say, okay, like, you watch your career stagnate a little bit and your finances stagnate. So it is more of a mental shift, I suppose. And hopefully we're having conversations with our partners before we're having children about does the household finances look like once we go through that process.
Yes. Well, as soon as I found out I was pregnant and, I run Ladies Finance Club, I was like, babe, I've set us up a joint account and you need to be putting X amount in every pay. And because he's also self-employed, and I'm like, and we're going to be using that money because this needs to be equal from day dot. Ash, how have you had, if you're happy to share, have you had those conversations with your partner around what will happen when you are now not earning what you were earning?
Yeah, so we started to have these conversations a few years ago when we were still living in London, actually. And so at the time I was earning more than Alex, and my role had me flying to a different country every second week and just really was not conducive of babies. So while I was earning more in London, we made a really intentional decision that we would completely uproot our lives, move to the Gold Coast where Alex would be better paid. He's a health professional. Long story short, they get paid better in Australia than in the UK. And that meant me doing a complete career shift and setting up a business that we could see babies coming into our world in the future. So the retreats and the podcasts are very much like, they really light me up. They make a big change in the world, but the schedule is under my kind of control rather than working for a company and flying everywhere. And like, where's the baby in that situation? Like, she would be. Yeah. So we made that decision a few years ago, knowing that our lifestyle had to change if we were going to be able to have a baby.
Yeah, no, big time. For sure. London lifestyle. I take my hat off to people who have families in London. Having done 7 years there, I'm like, how are you surviving? Jade, so if we quickly jump back to the super, is there anything we can be doing pre-baby, during baby to make sure our super isn't being, I guess, affected so heavily?
Yeah, and obviously what the government's just introduced is going to significantly help that. I think just depending on how long you're going to have off, if you're going to have 6 months off, it's probably nothing to stress about too much, because if you are entitled to the government support or pension, you will have this super going in. It's also worth having a conversation with your employer about, well, am I getting paid maternity leave or paternity leave, whatever it is? Will I be getting my super entitlements, all of that sort of thing. But if you were like, well, I'm a little bit worried because I'm going to go and have a baby and indefinitely be off work, what can I do? So there's obviously, if you are a decent income earner, you can make some extra concessional contributions beforehand to kind of try and help bridge that gap. You can also super split with your partner. So 80 up to 85% of their contributions can go and be split with yours, which in this day and age, it is a good idea if we can kind of try and keep couples' super balances similar. Because of the thresholds that we're probably going to hit later on in life. Like, let's not talk about the $3 million extra tax. But, if we can try and keep our super balances similar, that is going to aid with a lot of things later in life. So the sooner we start, the less catch up we have to do later. We also do have some spouse contributions, so they can claim a tax offset for some of that, as well as there is some like low income government assistance that will just automatically apply to your super. So if I believe the figure is around, don't quote me, but 30 odd thousand, where you're essentially the 15% tax that you pay will get paid back to your super fund, as well as if you put in $1,000 to your super via non-concessional, the government will give you $500. So there are quite a number of incentive plans, I suppose, for you to be making those extra contributions if you're worried about your super.
Yeah, and they're definitely worth looking into, especially if you're not going to be earning. You may as well get that kind of free money from the government without government co-contribution and make that non-concessional contribution for sure. All right. And then the next topic I just wanted to chat about was around childcare, because that was, apart from like people's earning capacity, taking time out of work, their super being affected, this was definitely the next one that came up as the most significant expense they weren't really expecting. Jayde, because you probably know a little bit about this, and Ash, please jump in if you do as well. How does the childcare system work in Australia for someone who's
in terms of subsidies? Are we talking?
Yeah, in terms of subsidies and like how does it all work?
Yeah, so let's just start, I guess, with the fees. So every childcare will have a daily fee. So that might be $150 a day. It might be $180 a day. Then, depending on your family income, the government will help subsidize that. So it definitely does cut out at well over sort of 500,000. But if you're earning below that threshold, there'll be an element where the government will actually give you back some of your childcare costs. So you don't have to fork it out every week. What will happen is essentially, if you qualify for it, you'll pay the gap fee basically between what childcare charges you and what the daycare will, Centrelink will top you up with essentially. In Queensland, we've also got some free kindy for kids who are 4 and 5, which is also depending on your level of percentage-based subsidy. It makes a pretty big impact on your weekly costs for 40 weeks of the year. So there's different variations to the childcare across different states to a degree when it comes to that free kindy. But yeah, essentially the cost is significantly reduced. I think it's a really good scheme. The second child also, you usually get around 20% extra subsidy from childcare subsidy support as well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And Ash, have you looked into this at all, or is this something that you're considering?
Yeah, something that's really surprised me as soon as I started telling people we're pregnant, they're like, oh, have you put your name down for childcare yet? Have you put your name down for schools? You need to do that the day that they're born. And I was like, what? I haven't even had this little girl yet. So feeling a little overwhelmed by those sorts of decisions, to be honest. But yeah, I've got some friends who are very adamant on their little boy going to private school, for example, but they don't know where in Australia they're going to be living. So they have put his name down in every capital city for private schools, and it would cost them around $1,000 a school just to put his name down the day he was born. And so these are all these surprise costs that I'm learning about as we go as well.
Sorry, you have to pay to put your child on a wait list?
For private school, yeah. Yep.
And for childcare, you have to put your baby's name on a wait list for childcare.
Yeah, apparently you can put your name down while you're still pregnant for childcare to be on the wait list. And if you don't, you can miss out on some of them.
Sorry, Ash, to jump in, but our childcare has over a 200 child wait list for a centre that might have 150 places. So a lot of people are missing out, and a lot of people are actually, I don't know how ethical this is, but the childcare is saying, okay, your baby's starting at 10 months old. We have a place for you in January when your baby is 6 months old. If you don't want to attend, you need to still pay for it during that period. So two of my very close girlfriends have been in that situation where they've paid for up to 4 months for childcare that they're not utilising.
Oh my God, that is crazy.
Yeah, I don't know if they really should be doing that, but yeah, that's what's happened.
Oh my gosh. Okay. And so, Jayde, what are some money moves that we should be doing for our pre-baby checklist? Like, for instance, updating wills, life insurance. What are those kinds of I call them boring life admin, but they're very important. What are those kind of life admin things we should be thinking about in these pre-baby days?
Yeah, exactly what you've said. So definitely looking at your personal insurances, because there's little people about now. We want to make sure that you're covered if anything happens to you at any point in your life. And yes, obviously I'm not a lawyer, but getting your estate plan up to date to make sure it includes provisions potentially for guardianships, testamentary trusts, whatever that looks like. You need to seek legal advice around that. They're probably some of the biggest ones. I'd say making sure all of your sort of bank accounts, if you're going to be using joint bank accounts, all those sort of things are set up early on so that you kind of have your systems working before baby comes along.
Yeah. Ash, anything that you've done on that list or anything that you've got on your pre-baby kind of life admin checklist?
Yeah, thanks to Jayde, I went in and made sure my superannuation beneficiary was updated, but writing a will is still on our to-do list, and it throws, like, mum brain is crazy, Molly. I'm sure you're experiencing this too, but it's like, oh my gosh, what if something happens to both of us? Where does our baby go, and how do we make sure that she is supported? And we're still working through those decisions, but it's it's a lot.
Yeah, I had to do my will when I didn't even have kids and I was single, and they'd be like, where do you want your future non-existent children to go? And I was like, that is a great question. I don't know. So I always say nothing feels quite like adulting, like, have you thought about your death? But it is a really important thing to do. And obviously we work with some amazing estate planners. So just head over to Ladies Finance Club if you want to be connected or have a few conversations with a couple. And Jayde, from a financial advisor perspective, what can we do to set our kids up financially for the future? I mean, if we're in that, lucky financial position, should we start investing for them from day one or set up a savings account? What did you do in your situation?
Yeah, so you definitely can start, a savings account. You can start, if you're someone who is already investing in ETFs or whatever it looks like, you can set those up for your kids. We just need to be mindful under those two models that at some point they may start to pay up to 66% tax, unearned income minus tax. So just need to be mindful of that. So with our high income earners, we use investment bonds for our children. So they're not taxed at your marginal tax rate. They're taxed at the company tax rate. And then eventually when you want to gift it to them, you are not paying capital gains tax. That's probably the biggest draw card. Personally, though, I think that you need to put your own life jacket on first before we go saving anybody else. Yeah. So for me, financial literacy education is probably the most important thing you can gift your children. What's that saying about the guy who goes fishing, like give him a fish and he'll eat for a night, and teach him to fish and he'll eat for his life sort of thing. So I personally don't have savings or investments for my children. We are just working on our own position, being debt-free by the time they're sort of teenagers, and then being able to fund things that they need for their life. Buying assets for ourselves that are maybe going to help them. So maybe buying like another investment property where they can then live in while they're doing uni and they're not having to rent and doing those things. And they're going to get it all eventually one day anyway. So I just believe in giving them knowledge first and then giving them the tools to basically use the money that they'll eventually be gifted.
Yep. And I love that. And our money mindset is made up by the time we're 7 years old and is heavily influenced by our parents. So yeah, if your kids are kind of hitting that age, just remember the language you use when you talk about money. It is so important. I've got a whole chapter on it in my book. Ash, have you thought about this, or are you just like, I'm just trying to get through the first part?
To be honest, at the moment, my head's around like, oh my gosh, birth sounds scary. But yeah, it's something that we want to start thinking about. But similar mindset to Jayde, if we can kind of build a bit of wealth and some assets now, she's going to get that in the future anyway. But yeah, lots to think about and learn as we go.
Yeah. And I guess just to finish up, Jayde and Ash, do you have any advice for listeners out there with where you're at in your life, your career, or even just from, being Jayde, being surrounded by friends, mums, what you're reflecting on now? Any advice for listeners who are coming into motherhood?
I think one of the key things, if I reflect on my early days of being a mum, was there's not always going to be answers for why your baby is unhappy. So I had a really unsettled baby, and I spent lots of money and time buying gimmicks and buying all sorts of things that I was like, here, like maybe you'll sleep if we do this or do that, and not overthinking that. And I also think that it is okay we all go through this transition of matriarchs, or what's it called, moving into motherhood, where things change significantly in our lives, and we are not going to be the person we once were, and that's okay. We just need to, move forward, and eventually we'll figure out who we are going forward, and money is going to look different. My husband and I joke all the time about childcare, but the money that we're spending on our children, we're just like, wow, like if we invested that money, that this is just ridiculous. So a lot of my clients in their 30s and 40s all have the same goals. They all want to set themselves up for their future, but they all have high debt, high child costs, and it's just like you're spinning the wheels. So it will come as your children get older, things will get easier, just to have the right foundation in place with budgeting and trying to do the right thing for now, and it will just come.
Awesome. Love that. And Ash, anything from you with where you're at on your journey?
Yeah, I talk to a lot of women in their 20s who put a lot of pressure on themselves to have kids by a certain age. And personally, I'm having my first baby at 36. And thankfully, I've had great support along the way. And physically, I'm fine to do that. But I think giving yourself permission to push those deadlines that society sort of brainwashes us with a little bit, push them out to suit you and your lifestyle. And to be honest, I still feel like a teen mum at this age. So I think it's okay to wait and enjoy a career and travel and lifestyle and stuff before jumping into this. Because like Jayde said, once you become a mum, you're never the same person again. We can't bounce back. I do believe we can bounce forward into an exciting new version of ourselves, but you'll never have your 20s again. So enjoy it.
I love that so much. And I'm having my first at 37. I thought I would be married at 25. I'd have 3 kids. Like, your timetables look so different. And for me, it was very dependent on meeting someone. And that took me a very, very long time. And I still have so many amazing girlfriends who are still on that journey as well. Like trying to meet that person, or they're deciding to do it by themselves. So yeah, the times are changing, and that is absolutely fine. You've got to, we're all on our own journey, and I love that. There's no reason to compare. And I would say as well, if you are listening to this and in your own 20s, enjoy it. Like, I was always just so stressed about meeting someone, and I didn't meet someone till 37. That was a long time of stressing. But yeah, everyone's on their own time journey. Ladies, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing so generously about financially preparing for a baby. We really appreciate it. And we'll make sure in the show notes, we'll pop our links, because Ash, you've got a podcast as well. Can you just give us a little bit of information about it?
Yeah, of course. So it's called Reset, and it's for navigating all the different seasons of your 20s and 30s. Jayde has been on there talking finance before, but we also talk about psychology, career, skin health, the whole gamut of the different seasons that you go through in your 20s and 30s. So it's a fun listen.
Awesome. And Jayde, you are an incredible financial advisor in Queensland. Where can people get in touch with you?
Thank you. So you can find me predominantly on Instagram at Jayde_financial advisor. Otherwise, you can head to our website, which is mazzywealth.com.au.
Yes. And as I said, we'll pop all those links in the show notes. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Molly.